The 2025 hiring dominoes have started to fall, and while a lot of coaches have been scrambling to move up a rung on the ladder, Missouri head coach Eli Drinkwitz decided to get off the coaching carousel by signing a 6-year extension to stay with the Tigers. After inheriting a 50-50 program from his predecessor, Drinkwitz's Tigers took a few years to find their footing before winning 21 games over the 2023 and 24 seasons. Now, at the end of the 2025 regular season, they're sitting at 8-4, and depending on which ranking you look at, they're either just in or just out of the top 25. On the whole, this turnaround over the last few years has happened on both sides of the ball. The offense is currently sitting at number 28 in spite of 2 missed games by their starting quarterback due to injury, and the defense is ranked 10th, so both of these units are worth looking at. Drinkwitz came up in the profession as an offensive coach, though, and so in this video, we'll focus on that side of the ball, which he turned over to coordinator Kirby Moore in 2023. After taking over play calling, Moore got immediate results. While the Tigers had finished 85th in total offense the year before and never higher than 59th under Drinkwitz, in Moore's first season, they climbed all the way to 28th. After a brief step back in 2024, they're right back at it with, as I've said, the number 28 offense in the country. The driving force behind this turnaround is shifted from year to year between the run and the pass, but in general, and especially this year, the ground game has been the clear engine driving the offense. The Tigers are ranked 8th in rushing with more than 230 yards per game and 30 touchdowns. The bell cow of that run game is sophomore Ahmad, who has 16 touchdowns, 130 yards per game, and more than 6 yards per carry. When he comes off the field, he's spelled by fellow sophomore Jamal, who's got almost 700 yards with more than 6 yards per carry. When they throw the ball, the Tigers are a pretty efficient, if not explosive, unit. Senior quarterback Beau Pribula missed 2 games after suffering an injury in their loss to Vanderbilt, but he has the 28th best completion percentage in the country at more than 67%. In the other major passing stats, though, he's outside of the top 50, and as we'll see later in this video, Missouri's passing game as a whole has been weak against any back 7 with a pulse, and even some units without one. With those basics out of the way, let's get into some film study to show where this is all coming from. For this video, I've broken down Missouri's offense against Alabama and Auburn, 2 units ranked 12th and 31st respectively in total defense. Both of these were hard-fought games, with Missouri beating Auburn in double overtime 23-17, but falling to Alabama in a 27-24 game that was close from start to finish. These games are also interesting because the defensive strengths were inverses of each other. Auburn's currently number 12 against the run and number 90 against the pass, while Alabama has the 7th best passing defense, but is 36th against the run. In both of these games, Missouri was overwhelmingly an 11 personnel team, meaning that they played 66% of their snaps with 1 running back, 1 tight end, and 3 wide receivers on the field. In their other major personnel grouping, they took 1 wide receiver off and put on a 2nd tight end, putting them in 12 personnel, which accounted for about 29% of their snaps, mostly on 1st and 10 and 2nd and medium. Very rarely, on clear passing downs, they played with 4 wide receivers and no tight ends, and equally rarely, right at the goal line, they played with a 3rd tight end, but those were only marginal groupings. Their starting tight end is junior Brett Norfleet, who's good for a couple of receptions per game, but is especially valuable in the red zone, where he has as many receiving touchdowns as all 3 of Missouri's leading receivers combined. On the whole, though, the main job for Norfleet and all of Missouri's tight ends is to block for the running backs, and one of the main ways that coordinator Kirby Moore keeps his run game fresh, even while relying on it so heavily, is by exploiting the versatility of the tight end position. We can see this by looking at how Moore uses off-the-ball tight ends to fit into a number of different alignments and blocking schemes, letting them create different matchups at a variety of points of attack. Here, for example, we see Missouri in a 2 tight end twin set, with both tight ends lined up to the right side of the formation to the wide side of the field, and twins receivers on the opposite side of the formation up at the top of the screen. Alabama plays kind of a hybrid 3-4 defense where they have 3 defensive linemen at about 280 pounds or more, and then a hybrid edge position that they call the wolf that they can move around the front as the need arises. When Missouri puts 2 tight ends to the same side like this, Alabama lines up in an odd front, with the 3 big-bodied defensive linemen heads up over the center and heavy to the outside of the offensive tackles. And then they put the wolf in a stand-up position over the right guard, giving them an extra first-level defender to the side of those tight ends. They then have a linebacker on the outside to set the edge, while a more traditional inside linebacker rounds out the front to the two tight end side. On this play, Missouri's running an outside zone play to the right, putting a ton of pressure on the edge where those two tight ends are. To get the ball there, they're going to send their slot receiver in motion, which removes the cornerback to this side from the run fit. And then the offensive line and tight ends are all working to get a ton of lateral movement to the right. The running back starts this play in a pistol alignment, but he's actually going to cross the line of scrimmage almost all the way at the far hash, so that helps to visualize the part of the field that they're attacking here. As we can see from that wide point of attack, the offensive line's going to fly along the line of scrimmage here, and they're basically going to get each of Alabama's defensive linemen off by a gap or more. So before the snap, we see that this defensive lineman is lined up outside of the right tackle. But after the snap, we see that Missouri's able to overtake him with the right guard, who gets across his face and cuts him off from the play. With the right guard taking that defender, the right tackle is able to climb to the inside linebacker, while the two tight ends end up doubling the linebacker on the edge. When we pause the play right here, you can really see the point of attack as it would ideally develop. The tight ends are blocking out and widening that edge player, while the right tackle seals off the inside linebacker, creating a running lane between those two blocks. Unfortunately for them, Alabama's inside linebacker is going to close that lane. Right here, we see the right tackle engaged with him just a little bit past the middle of the field and about 1 yard beyond the line of scrimmage. When we run it forward, though, we see that linebacker's pressing the line and pushing his blocker back so that they end up on the right hash close to the line of scrimmage. That closes up the outside lane that looked open earlier in the down, forcing the running back to cut back, where the other linebacker coming from the backside is able to limit what could have been a much bigger play by making a tackle in pursuit. On that play, an important thing to notice before the snap is that if you draw a line through the on-the-ball tight end, there's actually only one defender outside of him. The tight ends out-leverage both of the next two defenders to the inside, and that's what makes attacking the edge here so appealing. That won't always be the case, though, and that's where the versatility of Missouri's off-the-ball tight ends opens up a lot of possibilities. Here, Missouri's in another two tight end set. They're using an unbalanced line with the right tackle bumped over to play next to the left tackle. So the right guard is the only lineman to the right of center inside of the tight ends, but the basic concepts that we just saw still apply. On this play, if we draw a line through the on-the-ball tight end, we see that Auburn actually has 3 defenders outside of that line, so attacking the edge to this side won't be a good option. If we look at the opposite edge, we see that Auburn's in good shape there as well, with an edge player on the line outside of Missouri's over tackle, and a safety lined up even to the outside of him. So with a total of 5 defenders lined up outside of Missouri's 5 linemen, what do? They use the 2 tight ends to block the defenders on the edge, with the off-the-ball tight end swiping back across the formation to block one edge player, while the guy on the line stays home to block the opposite one. With those 2 edge players kicked out wide by the tight ends, the 5 offensive linemen are then free to fire off the ball downhill, where there are only 5 defenders left between the edges. More specifically, what Missouri's attacking here is the bubble in between the nose tackle, who's lined up over the center, and the defensive tackle, who's lined up over the left tackle. That leaves just a linebacker covering the bubble over the left guard. The running back then is going to read the linebacker that's playing in that bubble. On this play, that defender starts out lined up outside of the left hash, but then after the snap, he falls back inside, getting caught up behind the left guard's block on the nose tackle. The running back sees this and bangs it into that space down the hash, and Missouri picks up a nice gain between the tackles in the red zone. On this play, we'll see a third point of attack. This time, Missouri's putting their tight ends to opposite sides of the formation, with the on-the-ball tight end lined up to the right to the wide side of the field, and the off-the-ball tight end in the backfield to the left. This time, if we draw a line through the left tackle, we see that Alabama only has 1 front defender outside of him, and so this time Missouri's going to use their tight end to attack that edge with an outside zone play, releasing wide and chipping back on that defensive end to help the left tackle get him under control, before releasing up to try and seal off the linebacker to the inside. Or at least that's how it's supposed to work. In reality, the safety playing over Missouri's slot receiver is going to fight to set the edge and knock that guy backward to the line of scrimmage, taking away a true outside lane. And then the left guard's lateral movement is going to get used against him, with the defensive lineman washing him down the line and filling up any space inside of that safety who's setting the edge. With the lateral movement that Missouri's lines created, though, they've washed almost everyone in Alabama's front all the way to the numbers, opening up a cutback lane for the back, who redirects into that space for another nice gain. The off-the-ball tight end is just one tool that Kirby Moore can use to target different points of attack in this offense, and he does it in a lot of ways. If you want to know more about this, you can check out my Patreon page, where I have a more in-depth study of Missouri's use of the backfield against Alabama and the strategic back and forth that developed in that game. For Missouri fans, I also have a video on legendary Tiger coach Don Farrow and his split T offense, so if you want to know more about Missouri offenses past and present, check out patreon.com/tcpfootball. In addition to the use of tight ends that we've seen here, though, another major weapon in Moore's arsenal is quarterback Beau Pribula, and we'll see how the quarterback run game and tight end blocking assignments combine on this play. This is another one of those unbalanced two tight end sets, with a left tackle bumped over to play next to the right tackle toward the bottom of the screen, while the two tight ends line up to the opposite side. With two tight ends lined up to the same side like this, we've seen Missouri target two different points of attack. We've seen them run toward the two tight ends to attack the wide side edge, and we've seen them swipe back with the off-the-ball guy, letting him pick up the edge defender to create numbers for an inside run. Against this front, though, neither of those looks like a good option. If we draw a line through the on-the-ball tight end to the left, we see that there are as many as three guys outside of it, while Missouri has just the one additional blocker. To the inside, toward the overloaded right side, Auburn's put a defensive lineman outside of all of the right guard, right tackle, and left tackle, meaning that there's no interior bubble to attack like there was on the earlier play that we saw near the goal line. When we draw a line through the over tackle, though, we see that there's just one guy outside of him, with all other front defenders being outflanked to the inside. To attack this edge from this alignment, they're going to run a quarterback counterplay with a toss fake to the right. On a counterplay, the play side offensive linemen are all going to block back on all of those defenders that they're outflanking. Then, Missouri's going to pull two blockers from the opposite side. First, the left guard's going to pull and kick out that lone defender playing on the edge. And then the off-the-ball tight end's supposed to pull as well, wrapping up inside of that block to take out the inside linebacker with the quarterback following behind him. That block's going to fail here, though, because that tight end's going to trip on his teammate and fall down, but it doesn't matter because the play design is too effective. Now, as I said, the quarterback is the ball carrier on this play, but what makes everything work is the fact that he, before cutting up inside the block of his puller, is going to fake a toss to the running back out wide. We can see the effect of this when we watch that inside linebacker who is supposed to get blocked by the tight end. Even though the pulling tight end trips and can't block him, when that guy sees the fake toss, he sprints out wide to cover the running back, opening up the lane that the quarterback's targeting and letting Pribula pick up the first down on 3rd and 2. Okay, so those are the key features of Missouri's run game, along with some examples of how it's supposed to work, and this is definitely the best part of the offense this year. The passing game was mostly ineffective against both defenses, and this was especially true against Alabama, where the Tigers threw for just 167 yards. They threw for more against Auburn a week later, but they did it on 12 more passing attempts, with the average in both games being just over 6 yards per attempt. Auburn has one of the worst pass defenses in the country this year, and for a passing game in 2025, 6.3 yards per attempt in that game is a really bad number. The completion percentage in both games was a little over 57%, which again is bad for 2025. To diagnose what's going on here, let's start out by looking at what did work, and then we'll close the video by IDing some of the main problems. First of all, one part of the passing game that did work and that helped a ton late in the Auburn game was Missouri's hot throws against the blitz. Here, for example, we see less than a minute to go in a tie game, and Auburn's crowding the line of scrimmage, showing blitz and playing cover 0 over the wide receivers. Up at the top of the screen, we see the cornerback playing 7 yards off of his man because he has no safety help anywhere near him if he gets beat. Pribula sees this, and here we see him making a call at the line of scrimmage. He catches the snap and throws it out there immediately, where his wide receiver is making one quick cut and coming open into all that space, with an off cornerback and no defenders dropping out of the rush into underneath coverage. Here, we'll see something similar on 3rd and 10 from the second overtime, with the crowded line of scrimmage, the defensive backs playing off in cover 0, and no deep safety help behind them. Again, Pribula takes the snap, drops back a couple of steps, and throws it to his man breaking inside into the space being vacated by those blitzers. They punched in the game-winning touchdown 4 plays later. In general, when Pribula could take the snap and hit his first option on rhythm, things looked pretty good, and at times Moore was able to use his play design to create those opportunities even when there was no blitz. One of the formations that he loved to use to do this was compressed stack sets, where 2 receivers line up close with one behind the other, as we're seeing on both sides of the formation here. There were a couple of different ways that Auburn wanted to defend these sets, but one of them was with a single high zone concept, which we're going to see on this play against the stacked receivers at the top of the screen. So in this coverage, one safety, the guy up at the top of the screen here, is going to drop out to play as a deep help player in the middle of the field. That's going to leave this linebacker then to be the flat defender, working out to cover anything that releases shallow and outside, while the cornerback defends the deep sideline behind him. To attack this coverage, Missouri's going to have their tight end run out into the flat, grabbing that linebacker in underneath coverage and pulling him out toward the sideline. Then, with that underneath defender gone, they're going to have the wide receiver hook up in the space in between the deep middle safety and the cornerback that's playing outside down the sideline. Pribula gets to the top of his drop, has the guy that he wants, and hits him with a quick throw in space. On this play, we'll see a cool way to attack a similar zone concept out of a compressed set. Missouri's in a tight bunch set here, so they have 3 receivers up at the top of the screen in a bunch. But Auburn's in a similar coverage to the last play, where they have a shallow defender ready to take the first route outside to the flats, and a cornerback who's going to defend deep into the outside behind him. To attack this, Missouri's going to take this wide receiver right here, the outside-most man in the bunch, and just before the snap, they're going to give him quick motion to the outside. This puts him outside of the underneath defender, who, as we saw in the last play, was supposed to be responsible for the flat. Once that underneath defender's out-leveraged, though, that wide receiver is really isolated against the off cornerback who's playing deep into the outside. After the snap, that receiver quickly breaks out and into the flat underneath of that defender, again creating a quick, easy throw for Pribula. So far in this video, I've emphasized Missouri's low yards per attempt and the fact that their passing game thrives on these quick, timing-based throws. Against anything deeper or when the first read wasn't open, though, they ran into some problems due to the combination of their protection, the quarterback's reads, and the depth of his drops, and this was something that happened over and over again against both the outstanding pass defense of Alabama and against the boomer-bust defense of Auburn. On this play, for example, we're going to see a similar zone concept to the one that we've been looking at up at the top of the screen, but this time Auburn's rotating their coverage toward that side of the field. So this safety right here is going to stay to this side, and he's going to play as the short underneath defender in the flat, while the cornerback again defends down the deep sideline behind him. With the safety playing in the flat like this, the linebacker to this side doesn't have to widen and is going to stay in the inside hook area, looking to pick up the first receiver breaking back to the inside. After the snap, Missouri's going to take their tight end and run him out wide into the flat, where he's going to get picked up by that safety playing shallow and outside. And they're going to have the outside receiver run a hitch, where he's going to get picked up by that linebacker. At this point, the play's going to break down, and we can see why when we look at the quarterback's drop and his protection. Let's start with the offensive line here. On this play, we're going to see that after the snap, the interior line retreats to a point about 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage before anchoring and preparing to engage the defensive line. When we look at the defensive line, we can see one of the benefits of doing this. On this play, Auburn's taking this defensive lineman to the left of center, and they're stunting him across the center's face where he ultimately loops to the far edge. The opposite defensive lineman then is going to twist around behind him, doing something very similar to the opposite side. The benefit of the offensive line's technique here then is that it lets that twist happen in front of them. The offensive line gets to see where both of those guys are going to end up before they have to figure out who to block, and this can simplify pickups and protection. The problem comes, though, when we combine that with the coverage, the quarterback's read, and his drop. On this play, as we've seen, the quarterback's looking to work the right side of the field, where his first two reads are getting picked up by Auburn's coverage. This is a quick passing play where four receiving threats are setting up 5 yards or less from the line of scrimmage, and so the quarterback takes a short drop and looks to get the ball out quickly. Here we can see that by the time he gets to his second read, his back foot is just 7 yards behind the line of scrimmage. When the offensive line's retreating to 3 yards, though, and then naturally giving a little bit of ground as they engage their opponent, that puts a lot of big bodies right in the quarterback's face, making it hard for him to continue to read across the field, where he actually does have more receivers than Auburn can pick up. Instead of continuing that read, though, he's going to scramble back into the right, which puts him right in the path of Auburn's looping defensive lineman as he works outside for a contain rush. For this play to work, the quarterback would have needed to diagnose the secondary rotation pre-snap, telling him that the two receivers to that side were going to be covered. In that case, he would have been able to start his read with the left side of the field, where he could come quick to one of those receivers before the rush got in his face. That brings up the question, whose fault is it that this didn't happen? Is this a problem with the quarterback's recognition, where he's not seeing something that he's supposed to see if he's going to make the right read? Or is it a problem with teaching, where he's not being given the keys that he needs to make the right choice? Either way, when he looks right and his first two reads are covered, the protection leads to him getting hurried, and he ends up scrambling into trouble trying to escape. Now, that was a quick passing play where the drop was meant to be short and the ball was meant to come out fast, but this kind of thing happened on deeper throws as well. On this play, for example, both of the wide receivers at the top of the screen are running beyond 10 yards, while the tight end releases out into the flat. When we watch the quarterback's drop, though, we see that his back foot's still only getting to about 7 yards behind the line of scrimmage. When we watch the interior offensive linemen, we see that again they're giving ground and not making first contact until they're about 3 yards deep. Pribula feels that space closing in front of him and tries to escape the pocket, where he's brought down by a blitzing nickelback who's tracking him from the other side of the formation. Now, to show that this wasn't just the Auburn game, here's a similar play from Alabama. By now, the different parts of this will all look familiar. It looks like Missouri's running 4 verticals, with the running back checked down in the flat to the top of the screen. After the snap, the offensive line retreats 3 yards to establish a new line of scrimmage, and the quarterback's back foot ends up about 8 yards deep. On this downfield concept, he's looking to the right, where his outside receiver has been driven out of bounds by the flat defender, and where his slot receiver has a linebacker dropping inside and underneath of him, taking away any quick throw in that direction. Pribula decides, therefore, to take the quick check down to the back, but he's actually worked himself about a yard forward in the pocket with his back foot at 7 yards. With the line in his face, he sails the throw out of reach of the running back. Again, though, reading this coverage differently might have opened up a nice completion instead. On this play, Alabama's rolling their coverage to the short side of the field, squatting a cornerback in the flat to bang that outside receiver and reroute him to the sideline. Meanwhile, a linebacker sits in the hook zone to take away short and intermediate throws to the guy in the slot. What this does, though, is it leaves just 2 underneath coverage defenders to defend the entire space from the right numbers all the way out to the far sideline, and there are a ton of ways, both through a different play call and through a different read on this play, which could have taken advantage of that space. Is this on the quarterback? Is it on the offensive coordinator or the position coach? Is it on the protection scheme? I'm not giving a definitive answer here, but it's clear that this is a problem that would have to be solved for Missouri to unlock their passing game. To wrap up this discussion, we can look at one more problem that showed up in the Alabama game, which was that there seemed to be either confusion around option routes in the passing game or miscommunication about which routes everybody was supposed to run pre-snap. On this play, for example, this wide receiver down at the bottom of the screen is going to run a curl right at the sticks. The quarterback's then going to throw something that's definitely not a curl. One way to make sense of this is if we think that that wide receiver has an option here to read the defender playing over him and to either break inside or outside based on his alignment. before the snap, it looks like the cornerback playing over that guy is lined up with inside leverage on him, in which case there should be a clear path for outside breaking routes to the sideline. It looks like that's what Pribula is expecting here. When the wide receiver runs the curl, though, he's running right into that defensive back's leverage. He's not open, the ball's not thrown anywhere near him, and you get an ugly incompletion. Maybe the worst example of this, though, was this interception, where this inside receiver down at the bottom of the screen is going to run a post toward the deep middle of the field. And it again looks like Pribula might be expecting him to break out. The result is a throw that looks like it's straight to Alabama's safety. Without knowing exactly how these plays are coached and read, it's hard to know who to put the blame on, but in 2025, Missouri's passing game clearly wasn't ready for the big time, and that was true even before Pribula got injured. Of course, that led to times where the inability to make defenses pay also had an impact on the run game, and if you want to see more on that, check out my Patreon video on how Auburn defensive coordinator DJ Durkin defended Missouri's run game knowing that he didn't have to worry about getting burned too often through the air. Alright, that's it for this video. Check back for more as the season wraps up, since I'm hoping to profile more of the biggest names in the 2025 coaching carousel and playoff hunt. I'll see you here then.